Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast with Cameron Madgwick with us today. He's CEO at Gibson Sheat Lawyers. We're going to talk about his law firm. It's quite interesting. Cam gave me a couple of numbers yesterday, and I'm quite eager to learn more about that side of the business. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com, which is my podcasting agency. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one, guests on other podcasts, or even find sponsors for your own podcast. Bottom line, podcasts can be a gold mine. I help you monetize them. And if you need help, podfire.com for that. Cameron, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and Gibson Sheat Lawyers?
Yeah, kia ora, Charles. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and hopefully to your wider audience. Yeah, we're a law firm based in New Zealand, beautiful country, bottom of the world, hopefully known to many of your listeners, famous for, amongst other things, the Lord of the Rings and a very good rugby team who are playing in the final of the World Cup this weekend. So our country will stop briefly for 2 hours while we get to that. But more about Gibson Sheat. We're a full-service law firm. We're almost 100 years old, so we have a long heritage and history. We're founded on some key principles of really helping our clients to achieve their best outcome, whatever that might be. We act for people in their individual capacity, what we call private clients, so high net worth individuals, or even, could be your mum and dad or your grandparents. But of course, we also do a lot of work for clients in various businesses and government, across the whole range, and they range from some quite straightforward asset protection or contracting type matters through to some quite complicated structuring or dispute resolution and the like. And just leaning to that point, if it ever comes to it, we will represent our clients in court. Hopefully we can avoid those types of outcomes through, good setups and good structuring. So that's us in a nutshell. We're a proud firm with that almost century behind us, and we're really looking to the future, looking to what our second 100 years might look like.
You had quite the career in various fields, from rugby to electricity to oil and gas. What were the highlights of that career of yours, and what did you learn from these?
Yeah, that's a great question, Charles. I really think that it gave me a much broader appreciation of the variety of drivers that are important for businesses. So, as you mentioned there, rugby, a professional sports organisation, quite different to the large law firm that I came from to join that, but really gave an appreciation that there are some things that are much more important than whatever the legal position might be. And in that case, it was, the purpose and the purpose of an organization that runs a professional sport is, if you really boil it down, it's about a game, and it's about people getting enjoyment from a game. So that gave me a real sense of the importance of looking to purpose. People's purpose is really important and is actually probably their biggest driver beyond anything, whether that's financial or anything else. The purpose is a really core driver. Moving into some of those other areas, electricity is a really interesting example of, I'm not sure what it's like in the jurisdictions that your listeners come from, but in New Zealand, it's a quite heavily regulated sector to ensure the security of supply to customers. And we're a relatively small and contained market, so there has to be some quite strong safeguards in place in relation to that. So that was really, in some ways, the learnings from that were really about almost back to the legal framework again, that the rules and the structures that surround that are really important. Moving into oil and gas, that probably taught me a lot more about the sort of macroeconomic drivers. We're oil and gas is, it's global commodities, and really impacts sort of a lot of the global financial trends. What the global energy markets are doing has a much bigger impact on New Zealand and most countries than almost anything else. So yeah, that really taught me about the those global kind of macro level influences on economies. So yeah, that was really interesting. What you didn't mention, perhaps it's a question to come. I've also have a number of governance roles, which I've found have been really useful, both in terms of understanding what the governors and therefore the shareholders of organizations are, what's driving them. The bottom line is really important, but doing it in the right way is important. Having social license is important. And that governance perspective, I've found really valuable in my sort of role as a chief executive, sort of knowing, what's happening up the tree, what's coming down the tree at you. I think it's a really useful and valuable perspective. And I've been fortunate enough through my governance roles to not only have commercial roles, but also roles in for-purpose or not-for-profit organizations. And that just, again, I find it quite grounding. You can sort of get a little bit tied up in your day-to-day, and your pursuit of the dollar and all of those things, and servicing your clients, but having that real purpose again is really, really grounding.
So how do you balance both? Do you have a number that you're comfortable making personally, and then share with the next generations after you? How do you balance money and social purpose?
Yeah, well, I think that it's really something that's up to each individual. In New Zealand, we have a movement called the 1% Collective, which really says that if everybody donated 1% of their time or financial income or whatever they were able to provide towards for-purpose organisations, then we'd all be collectively society would be inverted commas wealthier. So I find that's quite a useful framework within which to think. I don't imagine there's too many people who couldn't afford 1% to provide to these purposes. More generally though, and I touched on that just before, I think it's really important just to keep you more grounded in the world in which you work, to have these other outlets, to have these charitable and for-purpose outlets, and the skills are translatable back in. An organization working in the social space is going to put its people, very much in the center of what it does. And that's a really good reminder that we should all do that. Commercial organizations should do that too. We're nothing without our people. And so, I find that those learnings kind of come both ways. So I don't really segment them out. I don't feel like I'm trying to balance them. I feel like they actually sort of are almost symbiotic. They work together.
Right. And I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 20-ish. I think I never got in the school, but I had that sense of justice, quote unquote, and I was really good at arguing. Then later on in life, I understood that the law and justice is not necessarily equal to ethics. And in the case of lawyer, if we go with simple maths, one of them is not telling the full truth, is defending a criminal, for example, or, even criminal is not the word, but an unethical person that took value from society in some way. And the other is probably defending or going for the right one. So what do you have to do with this? Like, ideally, this planet, would it be better to have some kind of AI judge if someone is good, rather than having another human go at war for someone that did unethical things?
Well, that's another good question, Charles. I mean, these sort of ethical dilemmas are ones that, from time to time, lawyers do need to confront. I mean, most of the time, the type of work that lawyers are doing there's a clear party who has been wronged, and a clear party who is the victim of that, and it's just is trying to balance those up. And in those cases, or in all cases, particularly those that are more serious in nature, you're actually assessed, not, at least in New Zealand, not just by a judge. There's usually a jury as well, and a jury is supposed to be representative of the community in which you live. And so it's not just the judge, it's actually a jury of your peers. So for the very serious criminal offences, whether that's a murder or manslaughter, those type, really, really serious, it's not just one other individual saying, you've done wrong, I deem you to have done wrong, therefore it's actually a jury of your peers. And that means while they take into account all of the legal submissions, and they must be guided by those, they're actually deciding that as people. So I think that's quite a good protection in the system. And I would probably worry, at least where AI is at the moment, I'd probably worry if that was a machine doing that, because it couldn't take account of some of the nuance and really important human context. So yeah, that would be my sense of that one. And probably, I don't know if you were asking this, but my sense is that lawyers will, from time to time, get confronted by a client who wants them to cross an ethical line or do something that they're not comfortable doing. And that's a very big red flag for us. And we stress to our people that you never have to cross that line. We have professional rules and obligations upon us in relation to that, but you only have one reputation, and if you cross that line once, your reputation is gone, and that's really, really important.
Right. You're right with the state of AI. I would picture one AI for the defendant and another AI for the other party, and the judge would also be some kind of AI. Now the question is, what kind of money can people pull out for the quality of AI that will represent them, right? So that brings an ethical topic here. What I was also referring, and what I want to get to, there's two questions here. Well, if I think, well, the first one somewhat obvious is, do you accept all cases if you see that someone has very little defense? Because the premise is that everyone should have the right of defense, right? We won't, because else, and it's also not beneficial for society if we really don't know if someone really committed these acts or not, or judge at least by the greater majority. Then can you refuse a case if you see that, the guy pretty much has few defense and it's pretty obvious that he's a murderer, for example? Will you still accept that? And the second question is, if you're a lawyer and typically have a good chance to sometimes defend a murderer, do you provide psychological help to these poor folks that sometimes have to deal with, defending a dubious individual?
Yeah, more really good questions, Charles. In New Zealand, well, first thing is we as a firm don't do that type of law. We don't have anybody who does criminal law, so we're not involved in that. But in New Zealand generally, and most common law jurisdictions, so the United Kingdom, Canada, etc., the rule is that unless you don't have the specialty, you have to accept the instruction. So if somebody who had committed a murder came and they told you they committed it, you still have to accept that instruction if you're capable of doing it and you have the capacity to do it. Your obligation is to, if you know they did it, as in they confessed to you, you cannot mount a positive defense for them. So you cannot say, Charles did not do this. I will prove to the court that he did not do it. Your obligation, you can say, you can make the prosecution prove that you did do it. So you could say, well, I'm not expressing a view as to his guilt or innocence, but you need to prove that he did this. So that's a quite clear rule, kind of within Commonwealth or common law jurisdictions. Excuse me. As to the second point about, do we support the victims, excuse me, the victims of crime?
The lawyers,
Typically,
like if your lawyers go through tough defense, and
oh
that
yes,
at the end of the year,
it,
they know that it doesn't need to be someone that murdered, but let's say like someone that is a greedy liar, and stole a bunch of money from a bunch of people, and in
yep.
the end, you need to defend that asshole. Like, it's tough to somewhat sleep at night. Hey, what do you do in life? Oh, I defended this Wall Street idiot that stole 3 million, and I got him to keep that 3 million in his pocket just because I'm good at what I do. So how do you deal psychologically with that?
Yeah, I mean the well-being of our people is really, really important. So we do have a number of programs to sort of make sure that they're okay in that regard. We offer, whether someone asks for it, some people are keen to have that, and we've got some external service providers who will be able to provide that specific support. And it's always different. Some people need different things. We also have access for all of our people to service they can call anonymously and have counselling anonymously. So some people don't want to, expose that that's something that they're seeking. So the well-being of our people is really, really important. And we also make it really clear to everybody that you should talk to people, talk to each other, talk to your colleagues, talk to me, or talk to the other people important to in your life. And if it works for you, take time out. That's often just time away from it is a really good leveler and relieves a bunch of that pressure. So we've got some, policies and structures around making sure that occurs. Yes, because you're right. I mean, the well-being of your people is sort of the number one priority. Really, you can't do much without it.
Right. Now let's get to business. Gibson Sheat. How did they found you, and why are you a good fit as a CEO for them?
Yeah. So I'm the first CEO. So prior to my role, they had a general manager who typically was somebody who had general management skills. They were accountants. Usually they were managing the dollars and cents. And Gibson Sheets decided that what it really wanted to do was to move and shift where it was and what it was doing, and become a firm that was more outward looking, and really looking for opportunities that the market could provide to it. And so they recruited specifically for that, recruited for a CEO. Then there was a process which I went through, and I was demonstrated that I had the capability based on my past experience, a lot of the connections that they would need, and a clear plan and strategy for how we'd achieve those goals, particularly those outward-looking goals. Unfortunately, of course, that great leveler of COVID got in the way. So I started in this role about 4 years ago, which I'm sure your listeners will all appreciate. Covers almost exactly that whole period of disruption. So had sort of got my feet under the desk, done all of the work to come up with the business or the strategy and the business plan, and then all of a sudden really needed to turn 180.
Well, yeah. How did you pivot from that challenge? Because people couldn't show up at the office. Clients now had to book online sessions. I believe that court hearings were online too. How did that disrupted the business, and how did you got your head over water?
Yeah, well, I guess at a practical level, we had a lot of the IT systems in place to enable us to work remotely, but we'd never really used them. So there was probably just that period of familiarization for people being able to use those systems and processes. Probably the biggest challenge for us was the uncertainty. In New Zealand, we called it a hard lockdown. So literally you couldn't leave your house, sort of thing, and that was really challenging for a lot of our people, not knowing what's coming next in a kind of health sense, in a social sense, in a work sense. I think that uncertainty was really challenging. We have a mental wellness person that we work with quite closely. So we put in place quite a lot of support and guidance in relation to that to really try and help our people through that. Lots and lots of communication. That was really key. From a business perspective, not sure what it was like for your listeners, but here in New Zealand, at least initially, no one knew. This was unprecedented in our history, and no one knew what was going to happen, and everything just stopped. So clients stopped calling. All the matters that were underway just stopped, and so we were sort of watching cash flow slowly go down like this. Still had all of our people to pay, all of our suppliers to pay, and that was pretty challenging time. But then we had some good structures through that period, and then eventually clients sort of thought, well, okay, even though I'm working at home or not able to see you in person, we can still do what we need to do and move on. So we sort of, turned a bit of a corner. And I guess if I'm honest, I think probably a lot of our people really enjoyed that opportunity to, be at home, spend time with their families or people who were important to them, change up a little bit how they worked. I think that was probably a real benefit for a lot of our people, and really accelerated for us better systems and processes around remote working.
Right. Yeah, it's been quite challenging. I'm seeing you offer multiple services, so business, life, and so forth. So in these subcategories, there's various construction, disputes, debt recovery, and so forth. Which niche have you seen explode in the last couple of years in terms of popularity, in terms of profitability?
Yeah, it's a good question, Charles. I mean, we're a service organization, so we provide the services that our clients need when they need them, and really what that means is that we follow our clients and their needs, and therefore we follow the economy. If the economy is in a real growth phase, then you would see that all of our business related services would be in high demand, and accordingly profitability. Um, uh, when the cycle turns, you find that those, you mentioned one of them there, debt recovery, that becomes much more important to people. A lot of our disputes oriented services, those are the ones that become much more popular because people are really concerned to ensure that their rights are protected. And then we have some areas that are just oblivious to what's happening in the economy. So we still do quite a lot of work around well, we call it elder law, but imagine that your parent or somebody close to you passes away. There's work to do around that, and that doesn't really have an economic bearing. People pass when they pass, so that sort of just carries on, and that's probably one of our real strengths as a firm, is that we are very diversified. Right from that level of your grandparent passing away through to some very large business needing to restructure, through to, we've got a real range there, and that means that while the economic cycle still impacts us, it doesn't have a we're not sink or swim. We're not really dependent upon one area in particular. So but to your question, we follow the economy. So if commercial sector is strong, then that part of our business is strong. If the counter is true, then the disputes part of our business is strong.
And I would guess 80% revenue business, 20% personal.
Yeah, roughly. We might be more, we might be sort of 70-30 maybe.
Okay. I see also like one thing that caught my attention here, defamation. So some people have defamed me before and it kind of sucks, you know. I think it's mostly a psychological hurts than anything. I don't
Sure.
think would need to go to court now that I have matured and understand that, you know, it doesn't really affect my reputation, and reputation is mostly a construct. And if people think I am some way, well, so be it, you know, and I will continue doing business. I don't think it will affect my income as I am adaptable, but it sucks for most people, especially if it's the first time that this happens to you. And I believe that defamation is growing because of the online social media, right? Like in the past, I mean, yeah, in the past it could exist, right? Because it was small villages, and if you were ostracized of your own village, I mean, yeah, you had pretty much nowhere to go. You had to change village, which also sucks. But nowadays, everything's online, right? And people can post pretty much anything about you if they feel angry and if you feel that you mistreated them or whatever. Have you seen that category grow? And do you agree that because of the advent of technology and scale and the social media, you'll have way more of these cases than before?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't really seen that grow. And there's, again, it really depends upon the law in the country in which you're in. In New Zealand, there's a defense, a defamation defense called honest opinion. So if someone honestly believes something about you, Charles, and they say that thing, well, that's a defense, you know, and it's sort of a free speech type argument. And so we don't actually see a lot of that occur here. From time to time, yes. The social media lens of that, we probably view that more as that's just the place in which people are saying things. The occurrence or the frequency within which people are saying things probably hasn't changed a lot. It's just that it's much more visible now. The harder thing with social media is identifying the individual. You know, people are username 34791AQZ, right? Well, who's that? Yeah, how do you identify that person? And we do also in New Zealand have a number of government agencies who have quite a strong mandate to sort of hunt down harmful online communications. So that's not really something we get involved with. But I probably would tend to agree with you. You know, there are probably more people now saying things about other people, but yeah, I wonder whether everyone believes everything they read online.
Most do, I would say, and that's the toxic thing, is that, you know, like on social media, the algorithms, they will favor drama, you know. So if I start defaming someone, even if it's not true, even I'm kind of I'm a smart guy, you know, and when I see something about someone online, it tickles something in me. It's like the drama muscle, which I tried to lower down in the last couple of years, because there's nothing to be gained off drama, you know, just like serotonin spikes. But I think humans have that. And then the more likes or comments or reactions or incendiary emotions there are in there, the more traction it picks up, you know. And that's where we can see someone quickly lose out a lot of income. In my case, it didn't happen, but I know a lot of people as well, especially on the international scale, once you do business in many countries, like someone can spread false rumor and they're like, oh, they can't reach me, right? Because I'm in Brazil. But that is also false, you know, because you can get prosecuted pretty much anywhere in the world. It's just like local courts. I do believe, yeah, NZ, the fact that, yeah, there's these cyber community monitors, that's very good. I haven't heard of that before. And I also think that NZ people, generally speaking, they're more respectful. And yeah, like just generally speaking, Canadians are pretty polite to But yeah, it's sometimes some countries are very divided, for example the US, and that's where you tend to see lots of emotions pent up in there. I want to ask though, as the CEO of the company, what are your priorities this year? I see you're hiring, I see you told me that new contracts are coming in, so what are your top 3 goals for the rest of this year?
Yeah, well, our financial year is also the calendar year, so we're coming to the end of it, to be honest. So we're really more in planning mode for next year. We're about 3/4 of the way through our strategic period, and so we're really focusing on elements of our strategy, which you've highlighted one there. We're really in a growth phase, so we've been sort of trying to do quite a bit of sustainable growth, which is largely about making sure that we have the workflows and then bringing in the extra people we need to service that. Really trying to leverage, have well leveraged teams where there's sort of 3 or 4 people in each team, and work is done at the right level, so that the client is paying the right amount, but obviously that the profit that each of those people generate kind of flows through to the profitability of the business. So that growth piece is really important. We've got another strong theme around our people, so not just these new people we're bringing in, but making sure that the people we have are sticky and that we're able to retain them. So a real focus on their well-being and making sure that this is the best possible place for them to be. Sometimes that is about the remuneration, but often it's about other factors. What are the things that they really want? Have they got particular career goals? Have they got important things happening in their personal life that we need to try and accommodate and be aware of? There are a number of factors that sort of drive that. And then the final one really is around making sure, well, 2 probably, making sure that our people have got the best possible tools to do their job. So we've just gone through a major systems change. We're sort of 3 months into the new system. And so we're in a really bedding down phase of that. So probably the goal is to get it well bedded down and then start to really, can leverage it further and enhance those systems further. And then the final goal we have really is delighting our clients. We want to make sure that our clients really like working with us, so that they'll come back to us and they'll get us to do some more work, but also that they'll tell their friends, their colleagues, their business partners that, hey, this is a really good group of people to work with. And that has a number of aspects. Partly that's about the experience that they have, both the actual outcomes that they achieve through working with us, but also just how we interact with them, how we onboard them, how we treat them, how we report to them, how we communicate. There's a number of factors that go into that. We have been looking at developing a loyalty scheme for our clients, and that's sort of just paused a little bit at the moment, but that's probably will flow into the new year. So those are probably the 3 keys really. One is that sort of sustainable profitability growth, the care and well-being of our people, and delighting our clients.
Cameron, thank you for sharing that wisdom with us today. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, well, you mentioned the socials. We're all over the socials. If people want to see us, they can look on X, they can look on Instagram, they can look on Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. We're all there. We're also obviously our primary website is gibsonsheat.com. But definitely keep an eye out for us. We like to have a bit of thought leadership, particularly LinkedIn. You'll find a bit of stuff there. That's where we tend to communicate with all of our commercial clients.
And that was another CEO Wisdom podcast with Cameron Madgwick and Charles Cormier. You can find us at ceowisdompodcast.com.